I overheard my husband at the hospital. He called me a cash cow and my sister laughed. I stayed silent, but now I know the truth. How I handle this shocking betrayal from the two people I trusted most. Crystal Johnson sat at her desk, her gaze fixed on the fertility clinic bill sprawled across her planner. The stunning skyline view from her Chicago high-rise office did nothing to lift the weight pressing down on her. "Here we go again," she murmured, rubbing her forehead with a weary sigh. As a fashion buyer, Crystal was expected to maintain an air of effortless perfection, but inside she felt anything but. Her eyes wandered to the wedding photo perched beside her computer. A picture-perfect moment frozen in time, her and Brian smiles wide and hopeful. 5 years of marriage and now an unspoken distance stretched between them, built brick by failed treatments and mounting expenses. Brian, always polished in his tailored suits, worked in real estate, his charm an asset in closing deals. But lately, even his easy smile couldn't mask the exhaustion lining his face. That evening, as they sat across from each other at the dinner table, Crystal exhaled sharply, pushing the bill toward him. "The cost just went up again," she said. Brian paused, setting down his chopsticks before reaching for the wine bottle. He poured a generous glass, swirling the deep red liquid as if searching for the right words. "Insurance isn't covering as much anymore," she continued. He took a sip, then met her eyes with a practiced reassurance. "It's okay," he said, his voice smooth but distant. "We'll manage. Work's been good," Brian said, locking eyes with Crystal. But something about his expression didn't sit right with her, like he was holding something back. "Yeah?" she asked, tilting her head. "Funny, our joint account's been shrinking lately." Brian barely hesitated. "Just business expenses," he said smoothly. "Had to put some money up front to lock in a few big deals. Nothing to worry about." Crystal was about to push further when her phone buzzed. Vanessa. Her sister's name lit up the screen. "Hey, can you talk?" Vanessa's voice trembled with excitement. Crystal frowned. "What's going on?" She shot Brian a look before stepping into the kitchen. "You're not going to believe this," Vanessa said, lowering her voice. "I'm pregnant." Crystal gripped the counter, her breath catching in her throat. "Oh," she managed, her voice oddly distant. "Wow, congratulations." "Thanks," Vanessa said, hesitating. "Listen, about the father, I can't really say right now. Personal reasons." Of course, Vanessa had always been the free spirit, the reckless one. No steady job, no real direction, always leaning on their parents when things went south. Meanwhile, Crystal had spent her whole life being the responsible one, doing everything right, carrying the weight of expectations Vanessa had effortlessly shrugged off. "You told Mom and Dad yet?" Crystal asked, forcing her voice to stay even. "Yeah, I just told them," Vanessa said, her voice light with excitement. "They were actually really happy, especially Mom." Crystal's grip on the phone tightened as a whirlwind of emotions crashed through her. She had spent years enduring the heartbreak of fertility treatments, pumping her body full of hormones, tracking every ovulation window with military precision, only for Vanessa to announce a pregnancy like it was nothing. And their parents? They didn't even question it. No concern about the father. No judgment. Just pure joy. "We're having a little celebration at Mom and Dad's on Saturday," Vanessa added. "You and Brian should come." "Of course," Crystal replied automatically, though she had no intention of enjoying it. The moment the call ended, she sank onto the cold kitchen floor, her hands trembling against the tile. She had done everything right, every injection, every carefully planned moment with Brian, every sacrifice, yet her sister, who never planned for anything, was the one being celebrated. By Saturday, the knot in Crystal's stomach had only tightened. As they sat in her parents' cozy living room, Elaine placed her hands over Vanessa's stomach, beaming. "Our first grandchild," she cooed. Walter, normally stern and reserved, smiled warmly, a kind of pride Crystal had never seen from him. Would they be this happy if it were me? She wondered bitterly. Beside her, Brian shifted in his seat, barely touching his drink. His fingers hovered over his phone, glancing at the screen every few minutes. Twice he excused himself to step outside. "It's just work," he said when he returned, flashing a quick smile, but Crystal wasn't convinced. A strange feeling crept over her, one she couldn't quite shake. That night after they got home, Crystal pulled up their joint bank account on her phone. The balance had dipped again. Another hefty withdrawal. Brian's so-called business expenses were becoming more frequent, the numbers too high to ignore. Lately, his late nights had piled up, each one excused with a smooth explanation about client dinners and urgent meetings. Crystal shut the screen and turned toward the sprawling city lights outside their window. Why was Brian acting so jittery? Why were her parents so overjoyed about Vanessa's pregnancy when they had barely acknowledged her struggles? And why did it seem like the harder she fought for happiness, the further it slipped away? The phone jolted her awake in the middle of the night. "Crystal, Vanessa's in labor." Elaine's voice crackled with excitement. She's been admitted to Chicago Memorial. We're on our way now. Crystal rubbed her eyes, blinking at the clock. 2:37 a.m. She reached over. Brian's pillow was cold, untouched. "Where's Brian?" she asked suddenly, a beat of hesitation. "Not sure," Elaine answered. "Probably working late. Anyway, can you make it to the hospital in the morning?" "Yeah, of course," Crystal replied automatically. As soon as she hung up, she slipped out of bed and padded into the living room. Silence. No text from Brian. His coat still hung by the door, untouched since the evening. Crystal exhaled, rolling her shoulders. Another emergency at work, she muttered the words under her breath as she set a kettle on the stove. For months, his schedule had unraveled, his time away from home stretching longer and longer. Every time she questioned it, he had the same answer. Big deal in the works. But something about tonight felt different, and Crystal could no longer ignore the sinking feeling creeping into her gut. At 6 a.m., Crystal stirred awake, her neck stiff from falling asleep on the couch. She sat up, blinking groggily, then glanced toward the bedroom, still empty. Brian hadn't come home. Suppressing the gnawing unease in her chest, she forced herself into the shower, dressed, and headed for the hospital. Whatever was going on, she'd deal with it after she met Vanessa's baby. As she pulled into the Chicago Memorial Hospital parking lot, something caught her eye. A black sedan parked near the entrance, Brian's car. Crystal's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. So he was here, but he hadn't texted, hadn't called. Inside, she followed the signs toward the maternity ward, the sterile scent of disinfectant filling her lungs, the pale green walls, the quiet of machines. All of it brought back memories of the countless fertility treatments she'd endured. Then, just as she neared a hallway corner, she heard a voice that made her freeze. "Brian." She has no idea. Crystal pressed herself against the wall, her pulse hammering in her ears. At least she's a good cash cow. Her breath caught. Then her mother's voice. "You two should be happy together. She's just a useless failure." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. Were they talking about her? "Thank you." Vanessa's voice. Light, amused, victorious. "Make sure we're happy." Crystal squeezed her eyes shut. No, this couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of cruel misunderstanding. But then her mother spoke again. "The baby really looks like Brian." Crystal's stomach dropped. The world around her shattered. Crystal's breath caught in her throat. "That nose, that chin. There's no doubt about it." Brian's voice carried through the partially open door. "We don't even need a DNA test. The baby is mine." A sharp, twisting pain shot through her chest as if someone had driven a knife between her ribs. It all made sense now. Brian's erratic schedule, the unaccounted-for withdrawals, Vanessa's mysterious pregnancy, her parents' uncharacteristic enthusiasm. It was all connected. From inside the room, the conversation continued. "How do you plan to explain this to Crystal?" her mother asked, her tone calm. Too calm. Vanessa let out a short laugh laced with cruelty. "She doesn't need to know anything." Crystal pressed a trembling hand to the wall for support. "If she ever found out that the money she saved for fertility treatments actually paid for my hospital bills, she'd lose it." Brian chuckled. "She won't. I've been careful, taking small amounts at a time. She's always so buried in work she doesn't even notice." "But what if she does?" Vanessa asked, a hint of caution in her voice. Crystal barely breathed, her ears straining to catch the response. "She won't," her mother declared confidently. "That girl has always put her career first. Family was never her priority. That's why we created a real family. Brian, you, and the baby." Crystal's fingers curled around her phone, her nails digging into the case. With shaking hands, she swiped open the recording app and hit record. "In the end, she can't have children." Her mother's voice continued, indifferent, almost dismissive. "Years of treatments and still nothing. I wanted a grandchild to carry on the family name. And Brian, he has wonderful genes." Crystal's heart pounded against her ribs. She had the proof, and they had no idea what was coming. "A child with you and Brian is a gift Crystal could never give him," Vanessa murmured, her voice laced with satisfaction. "When I first got involved with Brian, I never imagined it would lead here." A pause, then a soft, smug laugh. "But now I'm grateful. I have something she never could." Brian's voice followed, cool and detached. Crystal's world was always about success, fashion, awards, recognition. "But I wanted a family. She could never give me that." Crystal's vision blurred as tears burned down her cheeks. Every foundation of her life, everything she had believed had just shattered. "What will you name the baby?" her mother asked, her voice warm with affection. "Elaine," Vanessa replied. "I want to name her after you, Mom." "Oh, sweetheart," Elaine exhaled, overcome with emotion. "You are my true daughter. Unlike Crystal, you understand what family means." Crystal couldn't listen anymore. Enough. She pressed a finger to her phone screen, ending the recording. then slid the device into her with deliberate calm. Her legs still trembled, her breath unsteady, but her mind was crystal clear. Without a word, without a single glance back, she turned and walked away. Betrayal, rage, heartbreak. But beneath it all, something else flickered. A quiet, undeniable sense of freedom. The unanswered questions, the lingering doubts, all of it had been resolved, not in the way she had hoped, but at least now she knew the truth. As she stepped outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, spilling warmth over her skin. Crystal reached her car, slid into the driver's seat and rested her forehead against the steering wheel. No more tears came. Something new had taken root inside her. A plan began to take shape in Crystal's mind, cold and deliberate. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down. Walter. Her father's name glowed on the screen. Crystal, where are you? We're all waiting. Vanessa had the baby. It's a girl. Crystal exhaled slowly before answering. Sorry, Dad. Something urgent came up at work. I won't be able to make it today. A beat of silence. Then his voice hardened with disbelief. Are you serious? At a time like this, is work really more important than family? Crystal smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Yes, Dad, sometimes it is. Especially when family isn't really family. What the hell does that mean? She ended the call. Sliding her keys into the ignition, she adjusted the rearview mirror. For the first time in years, she saw herself clearly, and the woman staring back at her wasn't broken. She was resolute. By the time she reached her apartment, the Chicago skyline was awash in the fiery hues of sunset. Crystal poured herself a cup of coffee, then sat at her dining table, staring at the documents spread out before her. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts from the fertility clinic. Each piece of paper was more than just ink and numbers. They were fragments of her stolen life, proof of betrayal she could no longer ignore. The moment she had walked through her door, she had gone straight to work. No time for grief, no space for hesitation. Methodically, like preparing for a high-stakes fashion launch, she gathered every relevant document she could find. Everything had to be precise, every detail airtight. Facts, not emotions, she whispered to herself. Pressing play on the recording, she let their voices fill the room once more, dissecting every word, noting every damning revelation: Brian and Vanessa's affair, her mother's calculated deception, the siphoning of her own money, and the cruelest truth of all, the fertility treatments she had desperately undergone had, in the end, paid for her sister's baby. Crystal's phone vibrated on the table. A message from Brian: working late, might not make it home tonight. Love you. A slow, bitter smile curled on her lips. Taking care of your wife and daughter at the hospital. I see, she murmured under her breath. Without hesitation, she typed back a short, detached understood. Then she scrolled through her contacts, her finger pausing over a name. Laura Carter, a former law school classmate, now a powerhouse in family law. Crystal pressed the call button. Laura, it's me. I need to talk urgently. Can we meet today? Less than an hour later, a firm knock sounded at her apartment door. Laura stepped inside, her lawyer's mind already at work as she scanned the documents Crystal laid before her. Bank statements, credit card transactions, fertility clinic receipts. Then Crystal hit play on the recording. As Brian's laughter and her mother's callous words filled the room, Laura's expression hardened. This is outrageous, she muttered. Legally, you're in a strong position. This isn't just infidelity. It's financial misconduct. Given the way they misuse your joint funds, this could even be considered fraud. Crystal leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. What's my next move? First, secure all the evidence, every document, every transaction. Make copies, then open a new bank account under your name. Quietly withdraw your share before they realize what's happening. Laura's tone sharpened. Next, we gather more. There's a lot they aren't telling you. We need to expose every last detail of this conspiracy. Crystal nodded, a steely resolve settling in her chest. How long until we're ready? A month or two at most. But you'll need to act normal in the meantime. They can't suspect a thing. A flicker of something dark and determined flashed in Crystal's eyes. I can do that, she said smoothly. I'll just play the role of the clueless wife. The next morning, she followed her usual routine. Coffee, shower, work attire. Brian still hadn't come home good. He had no idea what was coming. Crystal moved through the day with precise efficiency. She stopped by the bank first, securing a new account in her name, then headed to work, throwing herself into her tasks with laser focus. To anyone watching, she was the same as always, calm, collected, professional. No one could see the fire raging beneath the surface. That evening her phone rang. Brian, I'm coming home tonight, he said, his voice unreadable. We need to talk. Crystal kept her tone even. About what? Vanessa had the baby. A girl. Yes, Dad told me, she replied smoothly. Congratulations. Silence stretched on the other end. Then, cautiously, Brian asked, "Are you saying that to me?" Crystal let a beat pass before responding, her voice light but laced with quiet steel. "No, to my sister. I've nothing to say to you." A pause. Then, as if grasping for normalcy, Brian cleared his throat. "Ah, right. Listen, could you make something special for dinner tonight? You know, like a celebration?" Crystal's lips curled slightly. "Of course, I'd love to." After she ended the call, she exhaled slowly. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to herself. That night, she set the table with precision. Brian's favorite dish is fine wine, the glow of flickering candlelight. She greeted him at the door with a warm smile, playing the role to perfection. "Welcome home," she said sweetly. Then, after a pause, she added, with a glint in her eye, "Congratulations on becoming an uncle." Brian hesitated, searching her face. Then, relieved, he let out a breath. "Yeah, thanks. Vanessa's baby is adorable. Her name is Elaine." Crystal raised her glass. "Elaine. What a lovely name." She clinked her glass against his and took a sip, her pulse steady. "Let the game begin. Just like your mother," Brian said with a chuckle. Crystal's smile didn't waver. "How nice," she murmured before gesturing toward the table. "Come on. Dinner's ready." As they ate, she kept the conversation light, asking about his job, the high-stakes deals he always bragged about, and his grand plans for the future. He answered, his responses measured, his posture slightly stiff, but as the meal went on, her easy demeanor seemed to lull him into a sense of security. Then she struck. "I've been thinking I want to continue with the fertility treatments," she said casually, cutting into her steak. Brian's hand stalled, his wineglass hovering just short of his lips. "Really? Haven't we done enough?" His voice was too controlled, too careful. "It's expensive, Crystal." She tilted her head, her gaze steady. "Are you worried about money?" "No, no, of course not," he said quickly, shifting in his chair. I'm concerned about you. The injections, the hormones. It's a lot on your body." Crystal reached across the table, resting her hand over his. Her fingers were icy, but he didn't seem to notice. "Don't worry," she said softly. "I'm strong." The following week, Crystal worked in silence, moving like a ghost through their shared life. During her lunch breaks, she visited the bank, requesting detailed statements from the past 3 years. At night, she combed through Brian's files, scouring his documents, emails, and hidden folders on his computer. Every detail mattered. Every unexplained transfer, every financial tie between Brian, her mother, and Vanessa. The puzzle was coming together. And soon, so would her revenge. "It's worse than I thought," Crystal told Laura one afternoon, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "For the last year and a half, Brian has been siphoning thousands from our joint account every month. That money, it's been funneled into another account. Most of it used to cover Vanessa's rent, her designer shopping sprees, even her hospital bills." She slid a thick folder across the table. "I have proof, bank statements, transaction records, even recordings of their conversations." Laura flipped through the pages, her expression darkening. "And your mother?" Crystal exhaled sharply. "She's in on it too. She's been secretly giving them money from her own savings, hiding it from Dad." Laura looked up, impressed. "I've handled a lot of cases, but I've rarely seen a client build such an airtight case on their own." Crystal's lips curled into a humorless smile. "They destroyed my life. I'm just doing what needs to be done." Laura placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're almost there. The only thing left is securing your own place before we file for separation." Crystal nodded. That part was already taken care of. She had found a new apartment just waiting for her signature. The moment Brian was out of town for his upcoming business trip, she would put everything in motion. That weekend, while Brian was away, Crystal moved swiftly. She packed her essentials, important documents, personal belongings, and sentimental keepsakes into boxes and relocated them to her new apartment. Then she made one final trip to the bank, withdrawing her rightful share from their joint account. Her lawyer had already prepared the divorce papers. All that was left was to strike. But one last thought lingered in her mind. Yeah, Walter had always been a stern but fair man. He valued integrity above all else. Did he even know what his wife Vanessa and Brian had done? She needed to find out. Reaching for her phone, she dialed his number. "Dad, I need to see you," she said, her voice calm but firm. "It's important and it's personal. Can you keep this from Mom?" Crystal's voice was steady, but beneath it lay something unshakable. On the other end of the line, Walter hesitated. "What's going on?" Concern laced his tone. "Can we meet tomorrow morning while Mom's at church?" The next morning, Walter was already seated at a quiet cafe downtown when Crystal arrived. She placed a thick folder on the table between them, her movements deliberate, her expression unreadable. Then, in a calm yet unwavering voice, she laid it all out. Brian and Vanessa's betrayal, her mother's silent complicity, the money siphoned from her fertility treatments to fund Vanessa's lavish lifestyle. As she spoke, Walter's face went pale. His hands curled into fists, then trembled as he unclenched them. His jaw tightened, eyes flashing with barely contained fury. "Unbelievable," he muttered, voice rough with emotion. "Elaine doing something like this. My own wife." Crystal studied him. "You really didn't know?" His gaze snapped to hers, sharp with indignation. "Of course not." His voice rose then lowered again. "I thought I was helping Vanessa get on her feet, giving her money so she could be independent. And when I asked about the father, she brushed it off, told me it was complicated. I never imagined Brian." Crystal pulled out her phone. "It's all here." She pressed play. Walter listened. The words cut through him like a blade, leaving him motionless. When the recording ended, he let out a slow, shuddering breath and buried his face in his hands. "I should have seen it," he murmured. "I should have known." Crystal reached across the table, her fingers light but firm over his. "They deceived both of us, Dad. This isn't your fault." Walter exhaled sharply. "What are you gonna do?" "Everything is already in motion," Crystal replied. "The divorce, the financial recovery, I'm taking back what's mine." For a long moment, Walter was silent. Then finally, he gave a slow, resolute nod. "I'm with you." His voice carried the weight of a decision made. "Whatever you need, I'm here." A genuine smile touched Crystal's lips. "That's all I need, Dad. Just your support." She hesitated before adding, "But